I'm assuming that you know how YouTube works, because you clicked on this video, you got to this video. I also assume that since you clicked on it, you know who we're talking about. You know who Protest the Hero is. If you don't, that's okay. I'm going to kind of get you up to speed, but there's a lot that we have to talk about on this video. There's a lot that kind of swirls around this album that they just put out that really needs to be discussed, so I really don't want to waste time with a lot of the, similar protocols that I have with a lot of my other videos. I kind of want to just jump right in. So, for those of you who don't know, well, stick around because I'm going to let you know. So anyway, Protest the Hero. They're a Canadian band, and they have a very progressive metal vein sound to them. So for those of you who didn't know, now you do. They have a sound that reminds me a little bit of what Coheed and Cambria would sound like if really they embraced the whole progressive metal idea instead of lumbering around the progressive alternative function. They've also been on tour with bands such as The Safety Fire, My Children, My Bride, As I Lay Dying, Tesseract, just to name a couple. But really, whenever you think about it, this is a band that really has a very unique and individual sound. Whenever you listen to the duality of the vocals, and whenever you listen to just the ridiculousness of the technicality that their music is able to really possess, they really have something going for them that, for some people, if they listen to it, would be like, well, this is kind of bordering that post-hardcore stuff that you really don't like, coverkillernation, but sometimes all it takes is a little bit of creativity, a little bit of technicality, and that's all that you really need in order to have one of those bands actually be pretty good. It's the fact that it's not there that actually makes them really crappy in nature. But I really want to talk about this album because of the way in which it was produced, the way in which it was made. After 3 successful albums, these guys decided to go a different route. They decided to go with, I think it was an indie, a go-go type thing. It was like it's kind of like a Bandcamp or a Kickstarter or something like that, where they're essentially funding the album through the fans by themselves. K.O. Dot has done this before. There's a couple of other groups that have done this. I'm sure that if you're in an indie group, this is something that you've thought about doing yourself. However, Protest the Hero did that because they wanted to record this themselves. They wanted to kind of release it independently and have a little bit of distribution rights with Razor and Tie Records, which is kind of a unique choice, but this was going to be their only affiliation with any sort of record label, was through distribution rights only, as opposed to going through the label itself for the actual release of the album and the production and everything like that. They wanted to handle that on their own. And because of this, they gave them the opportunity to do a lot of different things. For one, they were able to set their goal, which was at $125,000, which more than tripled throughout the 30 days of the campaign. They actually made their the due that they needed to make within 30 hours of the campaign being over. So there's definitely an outpouring of support for these guys, and it's definitely something that's grown ever since they first became a band back in 2001, 2002. Back whenever they were just 12 and 13 years old. They're still really young guys. So, the accolade and everything aside, we need to really talk about something else that these guys have been able to do on this album, on Volition, because of the unique way in which they went about it. They were able to get a lot of people in on board on this. You're seeing a lot of guest features on this album, a lot of names that you probably don't know very well, a lot of names that probably don't have a lot of familiarity to you. They certainly don't for me, but let's name a couple of them, and I actually need to pull up a list for this. We have Jadea Kelly, we have Kayla Howren and Ron Jarzombek. We have Jadea Kelly again. We have Wyatt Shuck. We have Mark Iannelli. We have AJ Kolar. We have Todd Kowalski. And we have Kevin Lewis, Josh Hange, and Mark Palin. Hopefully no relation to Sarah. So there's a lot of different individuals that are able to lend their unique voice or their unique talents to this album as well, which actually gives this a very dynamic experience. So whenever we talk about the music itself, once we finally get to itself as an album, this 11-track affair clocks in at a little bit over 54 minutes in length. And for those unfamiliar with Protest the Hero, you have to understand that this is a group that is able to blend multiple styles of vocal, be it growling, be it high pitch, be it, some screams, be it just some lower register keys. This is a very dynamic vocal group that also has music that really backs it up. The progressive vein is definitely a little bit more on the modern scale, where you're going to hear a lot of arpeggiation. You're going to hear a lot of random, very complex formulas that just kind of break down in the middle of songs. This is something where this is truly non-linear. It has a very nice little idea based around every track, and they're prone to do some concept albums. Now, I don't know very much about whether or not this is a concept album, and really whenever I listened to it, I heard so many different themes that I don't really know if those come together into a whole body concept release. However, if it does, really regardless if it does or not, this is one that was handled excellently. The reason why is because there is a ton of talent on here. There's a ton of people that are really putting their voice or putting their talents on this record. They even have Chris Alder from Lamb of God coming in to do session drum work, considering their original drummer decided to pursue an education. So already we have even more talent than perhaps one could speculate they had previously, considering it really depends on your opinion of Lamb of God's drummer, but I would say that conceivably they had the same amount of talents, but it's definitely one thing that helps. Musically speaking, this is an album that's able to really do a lot of things that are positive. The one thing that really illuminates itself to me is the way in which it's able to really back and forth its way from something a little bit more cleaner, a little bit more stripped down, and then also influence itself with the just sheer craziness, the progression, and the ridiculosity that it really has become. One of Protest the Hero's true signatures. The vocals I really have to rave about once again, because just the number of different voices that you hear on this album alone can sometimes make it seem impressive, but you have to really realize that their vocalist by himself has a dynamic range. He has a very dynamic vocal code and a vocal ability. So adding all of these extra individuals on here gives them the opportunity to use a couple female voices and kind of add that secondary dynamic to it. You also have the opportunity to have a guy like Todd Kowalski on Underbite provide a little bit more of a rough and gruff image. And we also hear some really, really deep guttural growls on this album, which is something that is also adding to the dynamic. So basically, on a vocal level, we're seeing an album that has basically everything that it needs in order to maintain a true variety. And it's something that happens more often than not on these songs in which multiple people make some guest appearances. So you have the opportunity to have multiple voices really showcasing their talents. Now, musically speaking, you almost don't need any additional help because they have the technicality side down, they have the songwriting side down very, very nicely. I like the addition of the acoustic guitars on a couple of these tracks, like at the end of, I believe, Plato's Tripartite, and also, once again, whenever we mention a track such as Mist, where the dynamicy of it and the fade out of it includes a little bit of acoustic softness, and it really adds a nice dynamic comparatively to the just ridiculous over-the-top progression, the harmony, and the arpeggiation that you're hearing throughout the course of the songs. I mean, there's just a lot of things that can be said about this album that are extremely positive. Negatively speaking, sometimes these albums can feel a little bit overly ambitious, and whenever you have too many people on board, it sometimes can sound very clustered. The one thing that I will cite against that potential negative side is the fact that in order to have a truly great and dynamic album, sometimes that has been what's been called upon. I will cite Arion, who I'll be doing a review of here within the next week, as one individual that's been able to bring in a number of session and also vocalist musicians that have been able to truly make his albums just absolutely incredible, very spellbinding and very enriching releases, really bringing forward the full experience, something that that Argent Anthony Lucasen probably could not have done just by himself. It definitely gives a lot more character to the albums. It's almost as though having a whole Dream Team roster at your disposal. The one thing I will say is that even though there is a fair amount of variety on this album, there's a lot of tonal similarity that I notice whenever you get kind of to the meat of the order, the middle part of this release. That for some people may actually provide a little bit of that similarity quotient where they think to themselves, this kind of sounds a little bit like what I just heard. I'm not sure if I can dig this as much. These are really nitpicking ideas, though, which is the one thing that whenever I nitpick, means that an album has just really done a lot of things to in the right way. They kind of gone about this whole thing the right way, and they've left it up to the fans, and they really have produced a great album for the fans. I'd give this an 8.5 out of 10. I know that's a really commonplace number for Cover Killer Nation. That's going to change in 2014. However, this is an album where it's hard to find a lot that's wrong with it. The vocals may be annoying for some individuals that aren't a big fan of that whole post-hardcore thing, and they are really just that directly against it that this will annoy them. However, I think that if you can push past that and look at it for on a musical level and really see the vocals as just something that is perfectly suited for the music, you'll understand why a band like this is so much easier to kind of get behind than a band truly of the post-hardcore persuasion, where it just feels as though everything is monotonously similar to each other at all times. So there you go. So thank you very much for clicking on this YouTube video that I have made. I really appreciate it, and I certainly hope that you will hit the subscribe button. That way you and we can talk a little bit more about bands such as this and other bands. That way we can really become musically acquainted and maybe have a true connection. Cover Killer Nation, out.